In 1993, Nelson Mandela and F.W. de Klerk were awarded Nobel Peace Prizes for the peaceful ending of the apartheid regime and creating a foundation for the birth of a democratic South Africa. This presentation is a group analysis that discusses the economic, political, and social state of South Africa during the 1980s and 1994. Furthermore, it will highlight the role of former Presidents F.W. de Klerk and Nelson Mandela in ending apartheid. Thereafter, we will discuss the Nobel Peace Prize and its purpose and whether F.W. de Klerk deserved to win the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993 and have the same praise and glory as Nelson Mandela. In relation to ending apartheid, F.W. de Klerk did deserve the Nobel Peace Prize as he played the role of a peacemaker. The Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded 103 times since 1901, and awards have been given to 137 laureates, 92 men, 18 women, 20 and 27 organizations. This award is awarded to a person who shall have done the most or the best work for fraternity between nations, for the abolition or reduction of standing armies, and for the holding and promotion of peace congresses. Alfred Nobel. The Nobel Foundation is broken up into 4 institutions that awards the prizes. 3 are Swedish and 1 is Norwegian. The Karolinska Institution, based in Sweden, gives the prize for physiology and medicine. The Swedish Academy gives the prize for literature, and the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences gives the prize for physics, chemistry, and economics. The Nobel Peace Prize is given out by the institution based in Oslo by the Norwegian Nobel Committee. The selection process starts early in the year, and all nominees and prize proposals are submitted before 31st January and are announced in October and November. Extensive research is done when choosing the prize winners, and self-nominations are automatically disqualified. The Nobel Foundation and award-winning institutions invite 6,000 individuals to propose and nominate candidates for the prizes, and respondents must write a detailed proposal as to why their candidates are worthy of the award. The purpose of the Nobel Prize is to give the Nobel Peace Prize is to give recognition to the efforts and process of peacemaking the winner has worked to achieve between nations. F.W. de Klerk and Nelson Mandela won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993 for bringing a peaceful ending to the apartheid regime.
The period between 1980 and 1994 in South Africa was marked by significant economic, political, and social changes. In terms of the economic estate, South Africa faced increasing international isolation and economic sanctions due to its apartheid policies. These sanctions had a severe impact on the country's economy. The apartheid system was entrenched by economic inequality, with the majority of Black population suffering from poverty and limited access to economic opportunities. The economic disparities were a significant source of social and political unrest. F.W. de Klerk, when he became president, recognized the need for economic stability and initiated economic reforms. In terms of the political state, the 1980s saw the apartheid regime becoming increasingly untenable, and internal and external pressures, including anti-apartheid protests and international sanctions, challenged the government's grip on power. F.W. de Klerk's presidency marked a turning point. He unbanned the opposition political parties like the ANC, and he also ordered the release of Mandela after 27 years in captivity. De Klerk and Mandela engaged in negotiations that led to the eventual dismantling of apartheid and the transition to majority rule. The negotiations culminated in the historic 1994 elections, where Mandela was elected as the first Black president. In terms of the social state, the 1980s were marked by significant social unrest and protests against apartheid. The government responded with violence, and that resulted in the tragic events of the Soweto uprising in 1976. The Nobel Peace Prize was jointly awarded to F.W. de Klerk and Nelson Mandela in 1994 1993, which recognized their efforts to end apartheid peacefully. The period after 1990 witnessed significant social transformation as apartheid laws were repealed and the country moved towards a more inclusive and democratic society.
F.W. de Klerk as a political leader. Frederick William de Klerk was a South African politician who was president from 1989 to 1994. De Klerk was brought up in a famous Afrikaner household and followed in his father's political footsteps. He was elected to the House of Parliament in 1972 and soon progressed through the organization of the National Party. He became the party's leader and South Africa's president in 1989. De Klerk's act as a politician was difficult. He encountered criticism from both white South Africans who preferred apartheid to be preserved and black South Africans who were doubtful of his commitment to reform. Nevertheless, de Klerk persisted, and he was essential to bring apartheid to an end and bring a new age of freedom in South Africa. After President P.W. Botha fell sick in 1989, de Klerk became the National Party president and fought Botha's power restoration. South Africa's National Party and the ANC arrived at a majority rule agreement in 1993 under de Klerk's leadership. In 1997, de Klerk retired, and in 2000 and 2004, he created the F.W. de Klerk Institution and Global Leadership Foundation. While de Klerk's legacy has a mix of both respect and objections, he is largely recognized for his important role in ending apartheid and establishing a more inclusive and democratic South Africa.
Frederick Willem de Klerk, known as F.W. de Klerk, served as state president from 1989 to 1994. He was the last state president of the apartheid era, a system in which racial discrimination and segregation was practiced and played an important role in ending this system. Soon after taking over as president in 1998, de Klerk realized that the apartheid system was unsustainable and he was going to implement change and reforms in order to dismantle apartheid. The current policies were unsustainable domestically and internationally and met with international disapproval and economic sanctions. In the early 1990s, negotiations with the ANC took place to pave the way for majority rule. This led to a very historic and significant speech on the 2nd of February 1990, in which de Klerk announced the unbanning of the anti-apartheid political parties such as the ANC, the Pan-African Congress, and the South African Communist Party. Political parties were also released. This included the figure of the anti-apartheid Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela had been incarcerated for 27 years because he was involved in the anti-apartheid movement. This was a symbol for the demise of apartheid. Negotiations and open dialogue could now take place between the government, other political groups, and the ANC, headed by Nelson Mandela. Many apartheid laws were repealed, and under the leadership of F.W. de Klerk, the Lands Act, prohibiting the land ownership by non-whites, and also the Group Area Act, where residential segregation was mandated, were amongst them. Over the next few years, all these efforts culminated in the first democratic multiracial election. The ANC ultimately won the election, and Nelson became the president of the new democratic South Africa. De Klerk is a controversial figure. Although he is loved for his role in ending apartheid, the decision to end apartheid by de Klerk was not very popular amongst his followers. Many white South Africans did not agree with his decision and felt betrayed. Despite conservative opposition, he persisted in his endeavors. His motivation is debatable. Some claim that he truly desired reform, while others argue that he was obliged to do so due to economic difficulties. He has a complex legacy as he both upheld apartheid and dismantled it. However, the role he played in dismantling apartheid and leading South Africa from a racial regime to a democratic state is undeniable.
Courage is not the absence of fear. It is inspiring others to move beyond it. In 1952, Nelson Mandela helped escalate the protests against apartheid by encouraging Black participants to actively violate laws. Against the apartheid regime, Nelson Mandela was arrested in 1962 and sentenced to life in prison in 1964. In 1985, the South African government was being put under immense global pressure to end apartheid. The government made an offer to release Mandela. However, this offer came with conditions that would make it impossible for him to fight against apartheid. Nelson Mandela chose to reject the offer and to remain in prison, stating that he isn't truly being offered freedom while apartheid is still in existence. In 1986, Mandela began reaching out to the South African government to see if there was interest in negotiating an end to apartheid. 4 years later, and after 20 years in prison, Mandela was released in 1990 at 71 years of age, but he still had work to do. Between the time he was released in 1993, Mandela held the first democratic elections. He was jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize along with the South African president at the time, F.W. de Klerk. At South Africa's first democratic elections held in 1994, Nelson Mandela would become the country's first democratically elected president. He acknowledged that there was more work still to be done, and that was up to the future generations to continue the struggle for freedom.
In conclusion, the presentation has explained what the Nobel Peace is and its purpose. W. de Klerk as a political leader and the economic, political, and states of Africa during 1990, as well as the roles played by former Presidents F.W. de Klerk and Nelson Mandela in ending apartheid. As a group, we have contended that de Klerk deserved the Nobel Peace Prize as he fulfilled the role of a peacemaker during the apartheid era. Thank you.